Hey guys, tonight we're heading back way back to the banks of the Euphrates River, where the land is muddy, the reeds grow tall, and humanity's first cities are still figuring out where exactly everyone is supposed to go, when they need to go. You step outside a thatched hut built of sun-dried mud bricks. The air is thick with warmth and the faint scent of roasted barley. There are goats bleating nearby, and someone is grinding grain on a stone slab, humming softly under their breath. And somewhere just out of sight, someone is figuring out where to dig the next pit. You're in ancient Mesopotamia, cradle of civilization. And believe it or not, one of the earliest places humans started taking sanitation seriously. You probably won't survive this. You're barefoot, the sun is brutal, and you haven't figured out how to say, "Where's the bathroom in Sumerian" yet? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time in the comments. Let's see who else is drifting off with Mesopotamian plumbing tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully through the reed mats laid across the dirt floor. They soften your footsteps as you wander toward the edge of the settlement. The homes are packed tightly, everyone living cheek to cheek, so to speak, which presents a particular challenge. Where does all the waste go? Well, early Mesopotamians, in their infinite experimental spirit, began carving out shallow pits just beyond their homes. These weren't just random holes. Some had lined bottoms. Others were set in specific directions to avoid the prevailing winds. Yes, they thought of that. Over time, they noticed something interesting. The reed mats weren't just nice to walk on. They absorbed runoff quite well. Hence, they became the earliest bathroom rugs, minus the memory foam. A few enterprising neighbors began constructing semi-private enclosures with woven walls. You enter one slowly. Inside is a low, rectangular trench filled with sand and bits of crushed pottery. Smells earthy. A nearby pot holds a scoop made from turtle shell. No one says toilet yet, but this humble setup. It's the beginning of something big. Now, mainstream archaeology confirms that Mesopotamian homes in cities like and Eridu had varying sanitation features, often determined by status. But out in the marshy rural zones, these simpler earth and reed lavatories ruled the day. And while not as glamorous as Roman aqueducts, they served their purpose admirably until the floods came. Ah yes, the Euphrates, the great life-giver, an occasional great wrecker. When riverbanks overflowed, these makeshift toilets became unfortunate water features. Still, even then, Mesopotamians didn't give up. They began elevating the floor levels of their homes and their bathrooms, one slab at a time. You reach a house where a clay bench has been fashioned into a raised seat, primitive, but clearly intended to direct waste into a pit below. It's dark in here, but you can see the outlines of a channel. You reach down and touch the clay, cool, smooth, and pitted with time. Historians still argue whether this sort of seat was common or reserved for priests, midwives, or other upper-class folk. But it's a step forward from squatting in the reeds. Outside, you watch a child run by, holding what looks like a bucket of ash. Her mother follows behind with a jug of water. The ash is dumped into a pit early deodorizer, and the water's poured to help move the well-contents downward. It's messy. It's trial and error. But it's sanitation slowly taking shape. A fringe theory, and honestly, A favorite among slightly bored museum curators suggests some communities may have experimented with fish ponds for waste breakdown using the natural scavengers of the rivers to clean up their messes. If true, this would make Mesopotamians the world's first bioengineers, and also the first people to ruin sushi. As the sun dips low and the fire pits begin to smoke, you sit cross-legged outside a home, watching an elder brush his sandals clean. He nods at you, then gestures toward the communal well. Another reminder, water in waste out, always two sides of the same ancient coin. And so, in the gentle hum of a growing city beneath reed roofs, and among buzzing flies, humanity's earliest toilets take root. Not with a flush, but with a hole of hope, and maybe the occasional fish. You wake with the slow dawn, stretching across the rooftops of Clay buildings, the color of baked bread, line the narrow streets, their walls cool to the touch after a night of desert air. In this Sumerian city, somewhere around 4,000 years ago, people stir, not with alarms, but with the scent of warm date cakes and the scrape of sandals on baked earth floors. You wander through the city like a quiet ghost, invisible but able to see everything. The rhythm of the day unfolds gently, stall keepers brushing dust from their wares, scribes mumbling over their tablets, and families tending to their courtyards. Everything feels slow, thoughtful, deliberate. And then there's the business of the day. Each house, compact and clustered, opens inward to a small courtyard. In one of these, you spot it off to the side, almost bashfully tucked away a narrow enclosure with a sun-baked clay seat. There's a slight dip in the center worn smooth by. Well, centuries of use. This, believe it or not, is a household toilet, and not just a hole in the ground. Some archaeologists argue that wealthier homes featured actual drainage systems carved from baked clay, sloping ever so slightly to carry wastewater out toward the alleys or collection pits. You crouch down beside one and run your fingers over the etched grooves, marveling at the forethought. Gravity, inclines, water flow. It's like indoor plumbing, Mesopotamian edition. Still, it wasn't all clay and convenience. Many city homes also kept chamber pots, simple ceramic bowls placed under beds or beside sleeping mats. The morning ritual, emptying them carefully, very carefully, into the back alley pits or a household latrine. And yes, this meant neighbors occasionally got a little too close to each other's business. One tablet found in Nipper contains what appears to be a complaint about overflow, possibly the world's first bad Yelp review of someone's toilet habits. But communal etiquette grew over time. Some streets had designated drainage lanes subtly lined with pebbles to distinguish them. It was the polite thing to do, dump waste in the right place and at the right time. According to one fringe interpretation, there may have even been early forms of night soil collection, where workers, possibly enslaved or lower-class laborers, went door to door to clean out waste areas. Not exactly a dream job. You follow one such worker now. He hums under his breath and carries a wooden scoop and a worn clay bucket. The scent precedes him, but he walks proudly. He knows his role is essential, quietly maintaining the invisible machinery of the city. You trail him as he stops at one door, then another. A woman offers him a small loaf of bread and a nod. Sanitation. It seems comes with perks. Still, not every neighborhood is so clean. You turn down a different alley and wrinkle your nose. Here, slop jars are tipped carelessly, and flies swarm in the stagnant runoff. The air is thick, soupy. And yet, even here people have adapted. A vendor sells aromatic oils from a nearby stand, claiming they'll clean the air and please the gods. You take a whiff frankincense, maybe myrrh, and something suspiciously close to old onions. Historians still argue whether such oils were used purely for ritual or if they doubled as ancient air fresheners. Let's just say both theories hold water. Walking back toward the ziggurat district, you pass by a more affluent home. Inside, a girl is being shown how to use a special clay seat by her mother. It's elevated with a small step for her feet, and a jar of sand sits nearby. The sand, you realize, is for covering waste, a simple but clever way to reduce smell and maintain modesty. The mother hums an old hymn as she pours a bit of scented water from a jug. Cleanliness in this house is next to godliness. Outside near the main temple, the priests are beginning their morning rituals. You watch them wash their hands and feet with ladles of cool water, anointing themselves with oils. Part of their duties includes ensuring the temple remains pure, physically and spiritually. That includes managing the temple's latrines. Yes, even the divine must go. One curious tablet fragment suggests that temple attendants maintain specific blessing chants for the latrines, as if asking the gods to protect them from whatever lurked down below. You imagine whispering such a chant while balancing precariously on a warm clay seat. Divine intervention feels suddenly quite practical. As the sun rises higher, the city fills with soft noise. You retreat to a shaded corner near a small drainage ditch. It's just deep enough to carry away household wastewater. You listen to it gurgle slowly, the ancient equivalent of a plumbing system whispering through the streets. And so, daily life in a Sumerian city reveals its quiet brilliance. No grand fountains, no marble pipes. Just reeds clay gravity and a healthy respect for what happens after the feast. You make your way toward the temple district and something hits you before you even arrive. A smell not entirely unpleasant, but unmistakably human. It's a heady blend of incense, goat hair, sun-baked clay, and the faint, ever-present undertone of waste. This is the scent of civilization, not the glossy bottled version you might spritz behind your ears today, but the raw, organic fragrance of a city trying very hard to stay livable. The ancient Mesopotamians, bless their proto-urban hearts, lived densely. In places like Uruk or Babylon, thousands of people were packed into a grid of homes, workshops, temples, and marketplaces. And where there are people, there are bodily functions. Constantly. You pause beside a street corner where several children run past with small water jugs laughing. One trip spills water, and you instinctively jump back only to realize this isn't clean water. You've narrowly avoided a puddle meant for rinsing out a chamber pot. Sewage wasn't hidden underground. It was often in the alleys, in the gutters, and on occasion in the courtyards. You take a breath slowly. The Mesopotamians, to their credit, noticed, and began thinking about what to do with it all. You see it in their urban planning. Houses were designed to lean ever so slightly inward, creating narrow corridors where water and waste could be channeled. Some archaeologists believe this was intentional, a primitive version of municipal drainage. Others suggest it might have just been architectural luck. Historians still argue whether these alleyways were meant for sanitation or simply the accidental result of too many bricks and not enough city permits. You follow one such gutter now. It's shallow, about the width of your hand, and lined with smooth pebbles. A faint trickle moves through it, grayish water, with bits of reed, maybe a sliver of olive. A woman steps out of her home, glances down, and pours a small bucket into the channel. Just wastewater today, but tomorrow, Who knows? You crouch down, peering into a larger culvert behind a temple courtyard. Here, a more developed drainage system has been carved, actual baked clay pipes fitted with an almost obsessive precision. These pipes, some no wider than your wrist wind beneath the structure, and out toward a common basin. The water they carry is dark and slow, but it moves. Gravity again doing the hard work of civilization. Nearby, a few workers are clearing debris from the end of the pipe. They use bent sticks and what looks like an old bone. A child watches, chewing on a date. If it stops flowing, one man mutters, "We all suffer." Words that could be carved above every modern sewage plant. And yet this is progress. While other ancient cities dumped waste into the streets with abandon, Mesopotamia was trying. These clay pipes and shallow drains were the ancestors of plumbing. Maybe not glamorous, but absolutely vital. You continue your slow stroll and notice a cluster of stone benches near a communal area. These aren't for resting. They have small holes in the center, and the faint scent around them tells you all you need to know. These are public toilets, the early kind. Simple slabs with openings that likely led into a pit or a short runoff tunnel. And while there's no flushing mechanism, there are jugs of water and baskets of reeds nearby. You watch a man carefully pour a jug into one of the holes, swirl it with a stick, and walk off with a surprisingly proud stride. This is, in a way, civic duty. Fringe historians point out that some of these public spaces were positioned near taverns and markets, suggesting a kind of early zoning law. If you're going to eat lentils and drink warm beer, maybe don't walk too far for relief. But sanitation wasn't just about where things went. It was also about where they didn't go. You reach a residential street where a simple cuneiform tablet set into the wall reads something akin to "Do not pour waste here." Rules, regulations, perhaps even fines. One ancient legal code, the Code of Ur-Nammu, includes vague references to public harm. Historians believe this could refer, among other things, to sanitation violations. Imagine being the ancient world's version of the guy who poured his latrine bucket into the temple fountain. Probably didn't end well. The smell changes as the wind shifts, blowing warm desert air into the streets. You pass a laundry worker rinsing tunics in what appears to be reused water gray, but still usable. There's a kind of practical recycling at play here. Every drop of water mattered, and even the stinkiest corner of town had to be balanced with survival. You sit by a doorway as dusk falls and someone lights a lamp nearby. The flame flickers, casting long shadows across the stone paving. In the distance, you can hear low chanting from the temple and the slap of sandals on the ground. A child laughs. Somewhere, another bucket is dumped, hopefully into the right channel. The scent of civilization lingers, but now you begin to appreciate it. It's the smell of effort, of trial and error, of a people who decided that even in the earliest cities, the messy business of being human deserved attention, ingenuity, and the occasional clay pipe. You walk beside a slow-moving side channel now, the kind of narrow ditch that cuts quietly behind houses and temple storehouses. It gurgles softly with runoff, a mix of cooking water, dye residue from a weaver's shop, and of course, waste. If you didn't know better, you might think it was just a sleepy irrigation trench. But this is no irrigation system. This is where the less glamorous aspects of city life quietly slip away. As you follow the water, you begin to notice little things. Bits of shattered pottery chamber pots that cracked from heat or careless handling, frayed rope, a half-dissolved reed brush. It's almost poetic the way waste and artifacts blend together here. Forgotten tools and forgotten drains. You kneel beside a cluster of flat stones, forming a primitive culvert. The stones are darkened by years of use, smoothed by feet and flowing liquids. A breeze picks up and stirs a faint aroma like wet clay mixed with ash. Not exactly pleasant, but oddly grounding. And then you see it, the ghost of a system. A stretch of aligned baked clay piping nearly a meter long, tucked beneath an eroded walkway. The pieces are fitted together like giant macaroni noodles, curved and overlapping, sealed with pitch and clay slip. This was engineering intentional, thoughtful, and long forgotten by most of history. It ran beneath the foundations of larger homes, temple kitchens, and most impressively bathrooms. Yes, bathrooms. In some parts of cities like Eshnuna or Mari, archaeologists have uncovered actual toilet rooms, small enclosures, built just off main living areas or inner courtyards. These rooms often had a raised clay seat, and underneath a sloped shaft that led directly into a clay pipe like the one before you. Primitive indoor plumbing. Not every house had one, of course, these were luxuries. But the fact that anyone had this kind of setup 4,000 years ago is quietly astonishing. You run your hand along the pipe. The surface is gritty but solid. Weathered by centuries, it still clings to its form. Someone sat here once. Maybe many people. Maybe a mother helping a child. Maybe a priest murmuring a prayer to Gula as he relieved himself after a long day. It's humbling. And like all plumbing systems, this one had its flaws. Remember those floods? The annual swelling of the Tigris and Euphrates was a double-edged sword. Great for farming, less great for toilets. Pipes could back up, latrine pits could overflow, and water could rush into homes, turning bathrooms into indoor ponds. Even clay drains were no match for a river in a mood. To adapt, some households dug backup pits, deeper receptacles lined with broken pottery and gravel to help with drainage. These weren't permanent fixes, but they helped during the worst floods. You step around one, now just a shallow depression behind a house wall, ringed with worn shards. A forgotten failsafe. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamians developed any kind of trapdoor or ceiling system for these waste shafts. Some evidence hints at plugstones, circular slabs that could be dropped into vertical drains to block odors or prevent overflow. Others believe that once things were dumped into the system, people simply hoped for the best. You wander toward the temple bakery. Yes, they had one. The smell of fresh bread mingles with smoke and ash from the ovens. And here, just behind the kitchen, is a small waste alcove. This area, shadowed and cool, is where cooking water and kitchen refuse were dumped. But it also appears to have a short clay pipe extending out from the rear of the temple's inner sanctum. You peer closer. It's not part of the kitchen. It's from a latrine tucked away behind a stone partition. Priests, it seems, didn't walk across the temple courtyard to find relief. They had their own secluded spot. The pipe beneath it curves downward and connects with the kitchen waste channel. Efficient. Slightly gross, but efficient. Some fringe researchers argue that this intermingling of sacred and well sewage might have posed a spiritual dilemma. Could divine purity coexist with human waste disposal? The priests apparently thought so, at least until the pipe backed up. As evening falls, you hear the soft hum of life winding down. Fires are stoked. Water is boiled. Chamber pots are emptied one last time before sleep. In one home, A man carefully places a reed mat over his latrine opening, not to hide it, but to keep out insects. It's a tiny gesture, but one born from generations of practical trial. And here in the quiet, you begin to feel it, how much thought went into this invisible infrastructure. Pipes, pits, grates, benches, jugs. Waste didn't just disappear, it required intention, creativity, maintenance. You lie down on a warm, flat roof, eyes turned to the stars, the faint scent of clay and river silt clinging to the air. And you think the Mesopotamians didn't invent modern toilets, but they sure laid the groundwork. One baked pipe at a time. The stars above you dim as the first streaks of morning light brush the city's rooftops. Down below, as the fires are rekindled and doors begin to creak open, your feet carry you toward one of the most imposing landmarks of any Mesopotamian city, the ziggurat. It rises above the city like a giant layer cake, terraced stepped and glowing faintly gold under the desert sun. But you're not here to admire the architecture, although yes, it's breathtaking. No, you're more interested in what lies behind it, beside it, and tucked discreetly into its lower chambers. Because even a sacred mountain of the gods needed a place to handle human matters, and those matters inevitably included toilets. You walk the winding processional path that leads up one level, then another. On each tier, you see smaller rooms, storerooms, shrines, and tucked away servant quarters. And near the edges, there they are again, small enclosures, square and shadowed some, with low stone or clay seats, others just smooth floors with sloped channels. You approach one. It smells faintly of ash and warm limestone. A small clay jar rests nearby, possibly filled with water, or perhaps a blend of sand and crushed herbs. You take a closer look and see the faint impression of reed matting pressed into the clay walls. Even the high places needed humble hygiene. Inside the main ziggurat, where only priests and temple functionaries could enter, the rules of purity reigned supreme. These people didn't just pray and offer sacrifices. They managed the city's records, performed rituals, and monitored celestial movements. They also presumably used the bathroom. And surprisingly, archaeologists have found purpose-built latrines in or adjacent to these temple complexes. Some even show signs of plumbing clay conduits that directed waste downward and out toward drainage trenches carved into the earth. Historians still argue whether these facilities were used daily or only for ritual purification events. There's even debate over whether the clay seats discovered were truly toilets or some kind of ceremonial basin. You squat beside one, now pretending to consult the stars, and decide either way, someone sat here, and it wasn't just to stargaze. You pass a servant's corridor, where a young boy is carefully washing a pot. The water runs along a carved channel in the floor, then into a deeper groove, lined with dark stones. You follow this groove as it winds behind the ziggurat dips below a wall and emerges near a communal waste area. This is where things get particularly earthy. At the base of the structure, workers haul waste from smaller receptacles into larger pits, often located at the city's edge or near gardens. These pits were sometimes lined with gravel and occasionally burned to reduce smell. Ash and straw were added to soak up liquids, not elegant, but functional. You peek into one, and the smell makes you reel. Still, there's something satisfying about how all the parts connect, the sacred up top, the serviceable below. Waste traveled sometimes by bucket, sometimes by pipe. Priests, noble servants, They all contributed to the same earthy system. A reminder, perhaps, that no one is truly above the call of nature. You retreat from the pits and find yourself among the pilgrim shelters where out-of-town visitors rested after offering prayers. These temporary huts also had waste areas, usually shallow holes surrounded by privacy screens. You imagine the scene: a farmer from a distant village kneeling in awe of the gods by day, then nervously looking for a place to relieve himself by night. In one corner, you spot a woven basket filled with rush stalks, neatly bundled. These were likely used for cleaning an early form of toilet paper, if you will. Reeds, rushes, leaves, and even bits of old cloth were common. And yes, historians still debate which method was preferred. There are even scattered mentions in cuneiform tablets of certain soft cloths being traded or gifted, possibly as a sign of luxury sanitation. Imagine receiving a bath towel today and reacting like you've been handed a golden scepter. You climb one last stair, ducking beneath a stone lintel, and enter a quiet chamber on the ziggurat's middle tier. A cool draft drifts through slitted windows. The floor is tiled in baked clay, and in one corner sits what looks like an ornate basin part, decorative part, practical. Some speculate it may have been used for ritual washing. Others whisper it was a high priest's private latrine. Whatever it was, you sit beside it and listen to the quiet. Outside, a breeze lifts the scent of incense and sun-warmed bricks. You imagine the rituals performed here, the prayers spoken, the waste managed quietly out of sight, yet essential to the sacred routines. Because even in the shadow of the gods, even among the stars and omens, there was a chamber, a seat, a pipe, and a pit. And someone long ago took care of it all, without applause or flushing handles. You descend from the ziggurat, slowly feeling the warmth of the stone steps seep into your feet. It's early afternoon now, and the city hums in that sleepy, sun-baked rhythm unique to ancient places. Somewhere nearby, a goat brays. A cellar fan flies off a stack of dried fish. And you, well, you're on the trail of a mystery. A simple one, but surprisingly contentious. The Mesopotamians, it turns out, left behind more than ruins. They left behind clues to their bathroom habits. And today's puzzle is this: what did they use to clean themselves? Because where there's a toilet, there's a question no one likes to ask, but everyone needs answered. You step into a small courtyard just outside a schoolhouse for scribes. Clay tablets line the walls, and children are copying cuneiform signs with styluses. But in the corner of the courtyard, next to a narrow stone drain, sits a small pot filled with water, and beside it a short-handled stick with a worn, spongy end. You raise an eyebrow. Historians still argue whether these were used for personal hygiene or just for scrubbing pots. Some suggest the spongy end made from soft cloth reeds, or even moss, was soaked in water or scented oil, and used in much the same way you might use toilet paper. Others say this stick was simply for cleaning the latrine itself. But as you crouch beside the pot and catch a faint whiff of lavender, you begin to suspect the former. A sponge on a stick passed down through time. Functional, reusable, and you dearly hope thoroughly rinsed. You rise and move on, now peeking into a small bathhouse attached to a priest's dwelling. There's no bathtub here, just large jars of water and shallow basins carved into the floor. A thin clay pipe snakes from one corner to the rear wall. In one niche, another mystery awaits: a bundle of polished shells, each about the size of your palm. Some believe these shells were decorative or used for scraping oils from the skin. Others suggest a more personal purpose. Let's just say, if you've ever picked up a smooth pebble and considered its possibilities, so did they. You move on. In the market, you overhear a heated exchange between two women. One clutches a bundle of rushes, the other a cloth-wrapped sponge. Their tones are pointed, and a nearby vendor mutters, again with the brush debate. You suppress a smile. The toilet brush, it seems, has long been a source of preference and pride. Rush stalks were common, readily available, sturdy, and disposable. Some wealthier homes used woven cloth pads, dampened with water, and left to dry in the sun. Still others opted for not cleaning at all, at least not immediately. Some cuneiform tablets mention ritual purification baths at sunset, which may have been the day's only true wash. Fringe historians speculate that there were even traveling vendors selling hygiene bundles, a pot of ash, a strip of cloth, and a bit of scented resin. Sanitation, Mesopotamian style, complete with customer service. You duck into another house, this one more luxurious. A sunlit latrine sits at the far end with a polished seat and a decorative jar beside it. The jar is painted with lotus blossoms, clearly not for mere waste. You lift the lid and find a faint, earthy aroma, crushed herbs, maybe myrtle or mint, likely used to sprinkle over the seat or the user or the general vicinity. A first-century attempt at Fabrizi. In one clay tablet found at Lagash, a humorous poem describes a man slipping while trying to balance on a slick latrine seat. His servant rushes in, waving a perfumed rag, and the poem ends with the man declaring, "I should have stayed in the reeds." Ancient bathroom comedy, delightfully timeless. You step back outside and walk toward the riverbanks, where women wash laundry and scrape reeds into usable fibers. Nearby, a child dumps a basket of rush stalks into a pit with practiced ease. No flinching, no fuss, just part of life. And it hits you. Mesopotamian hygiene wasn't just about what they used, but how they approached it. With thought, with rhythm, with an understanding that even the most mundane tasks deserved tools, preferences, and yes, even the occasional disagreement. So, whether it was a stick, a sponge, a shell, or a sweet-smelling cloth, the ancient world had its answer to the eternal question. And then what? You watch as the sun glints off the river and feel the weight of time press gently on your shoulders. Somewhere nearby, another debate is beginning. Someone prefers reeds. Someone else swears by cloth. Some things never change. You leave the riverside behind as the heat of the afternoon wraps around you like a heavy wool blanket. Dust rises with every step you take across the packed earth streets. Somewhere nearby, a seller hawks dried figs. A dog pants in the shade of a crumbling wall. You press onward, following the faint scent of wet clay toward an area tucked behind a residential district, an open clearing where pits dot the ground like ancient footprints. These aren't just any pits. They're the Mesopotamian version of a public sanitation system, or what passed for one in 2200 BCE. Welcome to the world of cisterns, pit latrines, and clever holes. The first thing you notice is the smell. It's not overpowering, but it lingers. Earthy, tangy, a little burnt. You kneel beside one of the pits. It's lined with broken pottery shards ostraca used in later cultures for writing, but here simply employed to shore up the loose earth. Some pits were lined this way to prevent collapse, others with gravel, and the more advanced ones with actual slabs of fired clay. You brush your fingers over the edge of the pit and imagine the thousands of times it has been visited. Not all Mesopotamians had private toilets, of course. Many used communal pits, like this holes dug at the edge of a neighborhood shielded by reed screens or low stone walls for privacy. Some were covered with plank-style seats, while others required good balance and a steady squat. You watch as a woman approaches one of the pits with a small jar of ash and a bundle of cloth. She looks around, no shame, just routine. She sprinkles the ash, first absorbent and deodorizing, and steps behind the screen. Her child waits outside, poking the dirt, with a reed stalk, humming. The use of ash, you realize, was crucial. Not only did it neutralize odors, it helped dry the contents and discourage flies. And when mixed with straw, it created a primitive kind of compost. Was it used for fertilizing crops? Historians still argue whether Mesopotamians made this leap or left such organic alchemy to later civilizations. But even the question hints at their practical brilliance. You move toward a larger pit, surrounded by what looks like a trench. A series of shallow channels lead toward it from several homes. These, too, are early waste systems designed to carry gray water and sometimes more colorful contents toward collection areas. During rainstorms or well floodings, these channels would flow freely, flushing pits and cisterns alike. Ah, yes, cisterns. You find one half buried under fallen debris. It's a large, sunken jar, its rim just above ground level, and it once held precious water. But in drier times, or in systems where drainage flowed in reverse cisterns, sometimes became the accidental recipient of less than pure liquids. This led to what scholars call cross-contamination and what everyone else would call a very bad day. In a clay tablet from Sippar, a legal dispute records a complaint that someone allowed their waste to leak into a neighbor's cistern, thereby poisoning the water of my household. No mention of punishment, just a fine and a sheep as restitution. Early plumbing law, part justice, part livestock. You explore another pit, this one clearly older. Its sides have collapsed in, but you see the faint remains of terracotta rings, circular bricks once stacked to reinforce the shaft. Ingenious. These rings could be added as the pit deepened, allowing it to be expanded or repaired without redigging. You smile. Modular sanitation, Mesopotamian style. But with depth came danger. Stories passed through generations warned of falling in, and you begin to see why. A child playing too close, a stone breaking underfoot. These pits were practical, but not without risk. Some communities covered them with reed mats weighted with stones. Others simply trusted in common sense. A gamble. You sit beside a pit and notice a pattern etched into the stones nearby, waves, perhaps, or wind. A personal mark. A way of saying this one's ours. Or maybe just a bored artisan passing time between bucket dumps. Whatever it is, it makes you smile. Even latrines had their artists. Suddenly, the wind shifts, and you hear something sloshing. You turn toward a small shed-like structure and find a covered pit. Inside, a thin trickle of water runs from a pipe into the hole, keeping the contents soft and manageable. It's a wet latrine, and its presence suggests a high-status home nearby. Only those with access to running water, however slow, could maintain one. Historians speculate that in larger cities, these systems were manually flushed servants or family members pouring water from jugs after use. Labor-intensive, sure, but cleaner, more pleasant. A glimpse of the future cradled in baked clay. As the light fades and shadows stretch across the pits, you rise slowly. The scent of ash and river wind mingles in the air. You glance once more at the orderly arrangement, the screen walls, the drainage channels, the jars of ash, and you marvel again at how much thought went into the act of letting go. Cisterns, pit latrines, clever holes in the earth, primitive perhaps, but also practical, evolved, even elegant in a sun-baked utilitarian way. Because when you think about it, the true genius of civilization isn't in the ziggurat. It's in the fact that someone 5,000 years ago looked at a hole in the ground and thought we can do better. You rise from the edge of the pit as the sun dips low and the scent of roasting grains begins to fill the air. The evening rituals are beginning. Fires are lit in the courtyards. Incense smoke curls from the temple's inner sanctum. Somewhere off in the distance, a priest chants a hymn to Gula, the goddess of healing. And you wonder, was there a god or goddess for this? For the business of the body, for the subtle art of managing human waste, of soothing the stomach and keeping the smells at bay? The answer, as you slowly discover, is a gentle yes. You stroll toward the edge of the temple garden, where herbs grow in low clay planters, coriander, mint myrtle, and another faintly bitter plant whose name you can't quite recall. These were used in rituals, certainly, but also in early hygiene and digestion remedies. You kneel beside a small clay statue set between the planters. It's unassuming, but lovingly smoothed, its features gently weathered. This is Gula, goddess of healing, of salves and poultices, and yes, likely of digestive health. Her temple inscriptions speak of cleansing the body from within, and some tablets record prayers for relief from abdominal discomfort. You smile. Even in the ancient world, there were prayers for constipation. Beside her, a second figure often appears in temple inscriptions, Enki, god of water, wisdom, and creation. His association with rivers' purification and flowing life made him an important divine presence in the realm of sanitation. Temples built in his honor often had sacred cisterns and fountains, part ritual, part refreshment, and possibly part toilet infrastructure. Historians still argue whether Enki's role in purification included bodily hygiene or if it was solely spiritual. But it's hard to ignore the architectural overlaps, the presence of flowing water, of clay channels, of sacrificial washing stations near latrines. You walk through a quiet section of a temple courtyard where a series of stone basins sit half filled with water. They're surrounded by reeds and lined with ash. This is no garden. It's a ritual cleansing station. And while its main function may have been spiritual purification, the setup is suspiciously similar to a hand-washing station. Coincidence? Probably not. You step into a covered chamber, a cool, quiet room behind a shrine. There's a faint trickle of water here and a smooth bench beside the wall. In one corner, a carved drainage pipe disappears into darkness. A priest walks past, nods solemnly, and sprinkles crushed herbs into the pipe. Perhaps it's part of a ritual offering, or maybe he's just freshening up. In some of the oldest medical texts from Mesopotamia, clay tablets describe procedures for cleansing the bowels using beer and herbs. One remedy even involves warm water infused with garlic and honey meant to restore flow. No word on how effective it was, but it does show that bodily maintenance was not taboo. It was part of daily health. A divine process even. You peer at a set of cuneiform tablets stored carefully on a low shelf near the sanctuary. These aren't hymns or legal codes. They're recipes, some for ointments, others for pastes, and a few for what modern eyes would definitely call laxatives. One line reads, "Grind the black root steep in date wine and consume upon waking." Another suggests, "In times of blockage call upon gula and rub warm oil upon the belly." You lean back, imagining the scene, a priest in a quiet chamber praying and mixing salves, preparing to heal someone with an upset stomach and a troubled night. But it wasn't just priests. In homes, in markets, in courtyards, sanitation and ritual intertwined. A merchant might burn a pinch of incense after emptying his chamber pot. A mother might whisper a blessing while pouring ash over the family pit. A potter might inscribe a symbol of Enki onto the side of a clay jar used for washing. You pass by a child's doll discarded near a fire pit. It's carved from wood with tiny painted eyes and a soft bundle of cloth as a stomach. It reminds you of a small figurine found near an ancient latrine, possibly used as a charm to protect the user. Superstition, maybe. Or maybe it was simply comfort, a reminder that even the most private acts were watched over by kindly eyes. The boundary between divine and mundane was thin in Mesopotamia. Even the toilet was sacred in its way, respected, tended, whispered over. Because to live well meant to eat well, to cleanse well, and yes, to go well. You sit beside a basin of cool water, cupping some in your hands, letting it drip back down in rhythmic splashes. You think of Enki, of Gula, of the clay pipes and ash jars, and the silent hands that kept these spaces clean. And you begin to understand sanitation wasn't separate from spirituality. It was spirituality. The humble toilet, the reed mat, the scoop of ash, they were all acts of devotion, of dignity, and of daily grace. You wake again in the soft hum of the early morning, nestled in a quiet corner of the city. The sun is just a pale smudge behind the desert haze. Chickens rustle in reed pens. Someone sweeps a courtyard with a broom made of palm fronds. It's another day in Mesopotamia. And, as always, someone has to clean the toilets. You follow a narrow alleyway that smells faintly of smoke and warm dust. It opens into a large, shared courtyard surrounded by several modest homes. At the center is a latrine structure, low-walled and slightly sunken, shielded on three sides with old clay bricks. Beside it is a heap of ash, a water jar, and most tellingly, a pile of well-used rags and rush stalks. And crouched beside the pit shovel in hand is a man, a servant, or perhaps a hired worker. He's muttering to himself rhythmically, scooping and dumping into a low cart made from woven reeds and wood. The contents are not something you look at for long. You step back respectfully. This was the servant's dilemma, essential and visible, and often unpleasant. Toilets may have been a blessing of early urban life, but someone had to maintain them. In wealthier households, that task often fell to slaves or low-ranking laborers. You watch as this man wipes his brow with a strip of cloth, ties a rope to the cart, and hauls it toward the alley that leads to the dump site. Not all servants worked in such grim conditions. Many were general household helpers, but those tasked with latrine maintenance had one of the most thankless jobs in the city. And yet, they carried out their duties with an air of practiced efficiency. You trail this man as he makes his rounds, collecting dumping, rinsing pits, sometimes muttering a quiet chant as he sprinkles ash. You pass another courtyard where a young girl is cleaning a chamber pot. It's small, unglazed, and stained from use. She pours its contents into a gutter along the back wall, then splashes water from a jug to rinse it down. A dog trots over, sniffs, and wisely walks away. The girl's mother emerges carrying a reed mat. She lays it over the courtyard latrine, clearly signaling it's been cleaned for the morning. This kind of visual cue, an ancient do not disturb sign, was common. A covered latrine meant it had been freshly cleared, while an open one meant it was ready for use. You crouch beside another latrine pit, partially collapsed, but still legible in its design. A few shell tools lie discarded nearby, thin and scooped perfect for scraping or smoothing. Some historians believe these were used in cleaning both the toilet and the body. Others argue they were simply multi-purpose tools, the Swiss Army knives of early urban hygiene. But regardless of the tools, the work remained the same. One tablet from the city of Lagash references a temple servant known as the Keeper of the Lower Gate, whose duties included maintaining the waste channels beneath the priest's quarters. His salary, a few loaves of bread per week, plus 2 measures of barley. Not much, but enough to keep him fed, and presumably clean. You follow the trail of carts and buckets to the city's waste dump and open pit at the edge of town. Flies buzz lazily overhead. The pit is smoldering, slightly ash stirred by the wind. Here, refuse was burned, composted, or left to decompose naturally. Servants dumped their loads quickly and returned, rarely lingering. Fringe theories suggest that some of this waste may have been repurposed as fertilizer, especially when mixed with ash and straw. While this wasn't formalized into a science just yet, the early understanding of waste management was unmistakably clever. Organic waste had its place in the cycle of life of you sit on a nearby stone and watch the rhythm dump, rinse, return. Dump, rinse, return. And yet, despite the daily grind, there's an order to it all, a quiet pride. These men and women kept the city livable. They prevented illness, controlled the smell, and made sure that the sacred act of sanitation was never left to chaos. One servant much older passes you. His back is bent, his sandals worn, but he smiles as he hauls his bucket. You ask him silently why he keeps doing this work day after day. He pauses, shrugs, and with a laugh says, "Because someone must." And there it is, the humble truth of ancient urban life. No matter how many ziggurats you build or prayers you chant, someone still has to scrub the latrine. And in Mesopotamia, they did. You step away from the city's edge, leaving behind the smoke and hum of the waste pits, and find yourself drawn toward the long, dusty roads stretching east and west. These are the trade routes, arteries of movement life gossip, and of course ideas. Not just ideas about gold spices or warfare, but humbler ideas too, like how best to relieve oneself in a desert, or how to dig a latrine that won't cave in after the first rain. Sanitation, it turns out, traveled. You begin walking alongside a caravan as it departs the city gates. Camels sway with the rhythm of the road. Their hooves kick up plumes of ochre dust. Merchants chatter in low tones, wrapped in linen, guiding carts, laden with barley copper, lapis lazuli, and tucked between the sacks, a surprisingly ornate portable chamber pot. Yes, even on the road, nature called. You watch one merchant dismount and set up camp. He pulls out the pot and a small folding screen of reeds. Modesty matters even here. He digs a shallow hole near a low tree, lines it with dry leaves and ash, and places the pot on top. A few feet away, his companion readies a clay jar of water and a scrap of cloth. The setup is minimal, but unmistakably familiar. A traveling latrine. You've seen similar systems described in fragments of trade correspondence. Letters etched in cuneiform detail, not just the terms of a shipment, but complaints about unfit road camps and requests for more ashes and water for the men. Sanitation wasn't just a matter of comfort, it was logistics. As the caravan travels further, you begin to notice regional differences. In one oasis town, you see flat-topped latrine pits covered in layered stone. In another, deeper into the hills, traders have hollowed out rock shelves along the riverbank, used not just to rest, but to channel waste directly into flowing water. Risky, probably, but effective at least in the short term. Historians still argue whether Mesopotamian traders brought latrine practices with them to distant regions or whether they adapted to local methods. Either way, it's clear that sanitation habits were shared, copied, adjusted. The proof: you spot a tablet fragment being exchanged at a rest stop. The merchant taps the etchings with pride. He's showing off a new design for a self-draining seat. A clay throne for the open desert. You pause at a well-trodden encampment where a permanent way station has been built, stone walls, a courtyard, and even a small bathing area. But what catches your eye is the trench running just outside the wall. It's carved to a gentle slope, lined with brick and ends in a covered pit. There are shards of perfumed oil bottles nearby and a discarded scraper tool like a primitive squeegee. It's clear this stop wasn't just about refueling. It was about refreshing and well-relieving. As you sit and rest beside a fire, you hear two old men debating something in low voices. One insists that in the south near Elam, they use sand, fine white and soft as a post-latrine cleanser. The other swears by salted water and a rag. They argue gently, sipping fermented barley drinks. Hygiene, as always, invites opinion. A younger traveler chimes in, sharing a story about a mountain town where toilets are simply wooden boxes suspended over ravines. Gravity does the work. You all laugh, part awe, part horror. This communal sharing of waste wisdom is not unique. Across the land at trade posts and river docks, stories of toilets travel as easily as tales of gods and floods. And over time, these stories become practice. A merchant returns home and modifies his courtyard pit. A servant sees a better way to clean chamber pots. A potter crafts a new kind of seat deeper curved for comfort. These innovations ripple across the land, carried on the backs of traders and tucked into the clay tablets exchanged like currency. You rise and continue walking alongside the caravan, the sun dipping behind your shoulder. You pass a field of broken amphorae, a donkey cart stuck in the mud, and yes, a well-placed latrine trench behind a rock outcrop. Even in the wilderness, someone planned ahead, and you realize, with a slow smile, that sanitation, quiet, invisible, unspoken, is one of civilization's greatest exports. From city to camp, ziggurat to trade route, waste management, traveled not by decree, but by necessity. And all it took was one tired merchant, one smart servant, and one bucket too many on a long desert road. The desert fades into golden twilight as you return with the caravan to the outskirts of a wealthier district. The homes here are larger, with higher walls, wider courtyards, and better ventilation. These aren't the modest mud brick homes of merchants or scribes. These belong to nobles, priests, and the well-connected elite. And if there's one thing privilege has always bought across cultures and centuries, it's privacy. You step through the archway of a noble's estate. The air inside is noticeably cooler. Tall clay jars of water stand in the corners. Palms sway gently in the enclosed garden. It smells faintly of date syrup and crushed mint. Somewhere nearby, a servant pours water into a shallow basin. And then you see it, a structure tucked beside the main courtyard, partially hidden by a curtain of linen. A private toilet room, not a pit, not a shared trench. A full enclosed space with a clay seat, smooth and cool to the touch. It's elevated, set into a base of polished brick, and shaped to cradle the user in comfort and dignity. Beside it rests a jar of ash, a reed broom, and what looks like a small terracotta oil lamp. Because comfort doesn't clock out at sundown, you enter cautiously. The walls are decorated with simple motifs, zigzag lines, stylized waves, maybe even a crude drawing of a fish. The air smells sweet-scented with burnt myrrh or cedar. The floor beneath the seat slopes gently into a narrow chute, which leads into a covered channel beneath the home. You can't help but smile. Indoor plumbing, Mesopotamian edition. Deluxe. You exit and find yourself in a secondary chamber just off the bedroom. There, a servant is pouring water from a long spouted jug into a foot bath. She glances toward another clay jar, stoppered ornate, clearly expensive. You ask silently what it's for. She opens it and reveals a fragrant paste likely used for personal cleansing. A blend of oils, ash, and perhaps, if the legends are true, a bit of crushed rose petal. Historians believe these toilet pastes were part of a ritual routine among the wealthy. Cleanse, scent, repeat. Some recipes have been partially recovered: olive oil, myrrh, honey, and even powdered limestone. Not recommended for modern plumbing, but undeniably thoughtful. You follow a different servant to the rooftop terrace, where water jugs and textiles lie in the sun. A chamber pot sits in the corner, partially hidden by a privacy screen. It's ceramic glazed, painted with careful floral designs, absolutely not the kind of pot you'd find in the servant quarters. Form met function here, and so did pride. There's a subtle competition in these noble homes, not just in architecture or wardrobe, but in toilet accessories. Who had the softest cleaning cloth, the most finely carved ash scoop? The most effective odor neutralizer status didn't stop at the bathroom door. It followed you in, wiped your feet, and made itself very comfortable. One clay tablet from Nippur, found in a noblewoman's estate, includes a list of household inventory. Among the linens and perfumes is this delightful entry: one jar for the lady's chamber, glazed with lotus pattern, used only in spring. Not only did they rotate their chamber pots seasonally, but they did so with ceremony. Think of it as ancient interior design. With plumbing, fringe theories even suggest that toilet-related gifts were exchanged among elites. An heirloom ash scoop, a scented cloth bundle, a pot of imported frankincense resin to be burned near the goddess seat. Whether that's poetic language or literal description is still debated. But you can't deny someone cared about what happened behind the curtain. You wander further and spot an elaborately carved seat set beneath a shaded alcove overlooking a trickling indoor channel. Was it a seat for conversation reflection? Or simply the best toilet in town? You sit beside it and imagine the nobleman rising at dawn, sipping diluted wine, settling onto his clay throne, and calling out to the gods for a peaceful morning. You spot another innovation: a cooling urn positioned near the toilet, likely used for rinsing or moistening cloths. It's built into a shallow alcove that faces away from the sun, early passive refrigeration. Thoughtful engineering for the most private moments. Even in bodily matters, comfort was engineered with care. Back inside, you pause at a room where a young noble boy is being taught by his tutor. They read aloud from a tablet, a soft chant of cuneiform syllables. The subject, hygiene and temple etiquette. Do not enter sacred space unwashed. Do not speak to the gods with dirty hands. Cleanliness, both spiritual and physical, was drilled into the elite from the earliest years. You wonder how many clay tablets were written while seated on a terracotta throne. And indeed, there are whispers among scholars of latrine tablets, fragments of poetry jokes, even minor contracts found near waste pits and private toilet rooms. Did nobles multitask while on the seat? Probably. One fragment even includes a dispute over land, etched hurriedly with smudged signs. The ancient equivalent of answering emails from the bathroom. The scene around you softens into candlelight as oil lamps are lit throughout the estate. You stand in the doorway of the private toilet room one last time and admire the full design, smooth clay seat, covered channel, scented water jar, ash basket, and finely woven reed mat. Every detail considered, every need anticipated. And you realize for all their ziggurats and tablets, their laws and gods, what truly defined the elite of Mesopotamia wasn't just what they built, it was how they sat. Because here, in the quiet dignity of a private toilet room, the story of civilization finds one of its most human chapters. One where clay water fragrance and ritual combine in a surprisingly intimate kind of sophistication. And somewhere out there, on a dusty road, in a reed hut, beside a smoky pit, someone else dreams of a chamber just like this one. It's early morning again, and the streets of the city are still soft with silence. Only the faint clip of sandals on clay and the distant call of a vendor breaking the hush. You slip past a temple wall and find yourself in a narrow alley between buildings, close shadowed, and unexpectedly full of writing. You squint. At first glance, it looks like accidental chisel marks or careless tool scraping. But then you recognize it. Cuneiform, etched low on a wall just beside a recessed corner, right outside what appears to be a now collapsed latrine. And it's not an official inscription. It's graffiti. You run your hand gently along the indentations. The signs are casual, almost rushed. Someone had taken the time, perhaps, while waiting their turn to record a brief poem about the state of his digestion. It goes something like, "The beer was strong. My stomach sang. The whole welcomed me like a brother. Charming, crude, entirely human." You walk on. This back alley once served multiple homes. A public latrine stood at the far end, its remains barely recognizable now, just a shallow depression, a few scattered bricks, and the faint outline of a waste trench. But on the nearby walls, dozens of inscriptions, some funny, some petty. One simply reads, "My neighbor is slow." Another, "This is the best seat in Nippur." Historians still argue whether these were sanctioned expressions or simply tolerated by landlords too busy to scrape walls. But there's no denying the volume. It seems Mesopotamians didn't just relieve themselves here, they vented here. You step into another structure, this one better preserved. A communal toilet room may be attached to a bathhouse or traveler's rest. Along one wall is a long clay bench with round openings carved at intervals like a row of sleepy faces. You imagine the quiet camaraderie of those seated side by side, each hoping not to make eye contact. Above one seat, someone has etched a warning, "Do not use after the cook." You smile. A joke as old as civilization. These little remarks offer rare personal glimpses into the minds of everyday people. So often, history hands us kings and gods. But here, scratched beside a latrine, we meet a man who drank too much date wine and decided to commemorate the consequences. In one house further down the street, you enter a private toilet chamber. It's modest. A small clay seat, some broken pottery in the corner, and fascinatingly, a slab of stone with 2 lines of cuneiform carved across the top edge of the wall. It's not a joke this time. It's a blessing. May Enki carry away what must be carried. May Gula restore the body whole. It's unclear if this was standard or something added by a pious homeowner, but the sentiment is unmistakable. Even here, in this most bodily of places, the divine remained close. You think of modern bathroom wall scribbles, crude rhymes, phone numbers, poetry in haste. There's something comforting in the continuity. In every age, someone waits for the person ahead of them to finish, gets bored, and picks up a stylus or a pen and leaves a message for the ages. Some Mesopotamian houses included what scholars call utility niches, small hollows beside toilet rooms used for storing supplies, ash reed wipes, oil jars. But in a few rare finds, tablets have been discovered tucked into these niches. Not formal records, personal ones. A letter never delivered, a list of debts, a prayer for a good harvest. Was the toilet room a place of solitude, reflection, relief in more than one sense? A fringe theory, though admittedly compelling, proposes that toilet spaces were viewed as thresholds, not just physically, but symbolically. A place where the body crossed from fullness to emptiness, from burden to relief. That such spaces might hold liminal energy and thus become sites for secret wishes, inscriptions, or rituals. You crouch now beside a collapsed lavatory and notice a strange feature. The brick beneath the seat is painted faint, but still visible with symbols of fish and flowing water. Was it decorative protective? Or simply a bored artisan's flourish? The lines between utility and artistry blur here. In wealthier homes, the cuneiform gets more elegant. You see inscriptions noting the date of construction, or the family name, or a dedicatory message like, "This room is made with favor and will be kept pure." A declaration of pride, of ownership, of a kind of toilet hospitality. Not all writing was carved. Clay tablets found buried in waste pits have been discovered with surprisingly mundane content, including a teacher's scolding message. You will not pass unless you study more diligently. Possibly disposed of intentionally, possibly just lost in the shuffle of everyday life. But the image of a frustrated student flinging a bad grade into a latrine is too vivid to ignore. You sit now on a low wall near a drain and think of all the things that happened in these corners of the city. Waste was disposed of. Jokes were made. Complaints were filed in brick. Blessings were whispered. Civilization, after all, isn't just built on laws and temples. It's built on shared private moments like these. The toilet wall was the Mesopotamian message board, the suggestion box, the confessional. Sometimes crude, sometimes poetic, sometimes oddly moving. And maybe, just maybe, that scribbled note you left on a bathroom stall in 10th grade, it's part of a very old tradition. You're beginning to appreciate just how clever these ancient engineers were. Clay pipes, angled drains, ash-filled pits, even graffiti that tells you more than half the royal inscriptions ever could. But there's one thing that hasn't quite come together yet. One great modern comfort that seems so far to be missing. You step into a courtyard shaded by a fig tree. A servant is pouring water into a sunken basin and scrubbing the edge with a reed brush. The water flows lazily down a channel carved into the clay. It disappears into a dark slit in the floor. It's a familiar setup. Carefully designed slope, good drainage, even a bit of incense wafting nearby. But as your eyes follow the channel, you pause. There's no flush. That's right. For all their innovation, their clever water channels, their clay plumbing, the Mesopotamians never quite invented the thing we've all come to take for granted, the flush toilet. You tilt your head and trace the system again. Gravity, yes. Flow, certainly. Scent control, somewhat. But a mechanism that sends water whooshing through the pipes with a satisfying sweep, nowhere to be found. Historians still argue why. The Sumerians had water. They had reservoirs, cisterns, and citywide irrigation systems. They built canals that stretched for miles and managed floodwaters with frightening precision. But when it came to toilets, flushing never arrived. One theory is simple practicality. Why waste clean water on waste? In a land where the rivers gave life, but also flooded unpredictably, water management meant discipline. Every drop mattered. Toilets didn't flush because they weren't meant to. Waste had to move slowly outward, quietly, efficiently, not all at once. You wander into a wealthier home where a more advanced bathroom is still partially intact. It's clearly designed for water use. The bench is elevated, and there's even a jar for rinsing. But again, the rinse water is poured by hand. Slowly, deliberately. A servant carries a jug, tips it gently over the bowl, then uses a clay stick to stir and guide the contents downward into the channel below. You nod slowly. Manual flushing, the original kind. You step out into the side alley where those channels collect. The smell is bearable thanks to the ash, but the slow movement is unmistakable. Everything trickles. Everything lingers. And the system depends on regular maintenance to keep flowing. A fringe theory you overheard earlier creeps back into your mind. What if they didn't want flushing? What if slow flow was intentional, an early form of environmental control? Letting waste settle, decay, compost, creating fertilizer instead of pollution. Even without the science, they may have understood the rhythm of decomposition. And there's another clue. You step onto a platform near the city's main canal where wastewater eventually drains. A series of reed screens line the channel placed at intervals. They catch solids, allowing only water to flow through. You crouch and inspect one. It's woven tightly coated in pitch, and someone recently placed a small jar of herbs nearby, perhaps to mask the scent. These are filters. Primitive, yes, but functional wastewater treatment. The kind of design a civilization develops when it doesn't rely on brute force to wash things away. You follow the canal downstream. A group of boys are throwing stones. A man is filling a bucket. A woman dips a bundle of rushes into the shallows and walks off humming. You watch the water swirl around the reeds, brown and green, slow and patient. There's no rush here, just flow. Back in the city center, you find a clay tablet half buried near a collapsed bathhouse. On it is etched a simple set of instructions. Pour the water slowly. Add the ash. Seal the lid before the sun climbs high. A user's manual for a toilet. Without the word, flush anywhere in sight. One of the oddest artifacts ever found near a toilet site was a small wooden lever. Not connected to anything. Some believe it may have been a symbolic gesture, a ritual tap or lift to call attention to the act. Others argue it had a real function, perhaps in lifting a cover stone or opening a hatch, but a lever is not a handle. And no matter how many reed scoops and ash jars they made, the Mesopotamians never devised the water surge that would centuries later become the hallmark of the modern toilet. You sit down near a water reservoir and watch the sky shift from orange to blue to dark. The soft sounds of the city quiet as lamps are lit and people settle in. Somewhere nearby, a chamber pot is being emptied. A drain is being cleared. Water is being poured slowly, carefully, respectfully. And you realize it's not the lack of flushing that matters. It's the presence of intent. Every act of waste removal here was deliberate, measured, human. Flushing came later, but the understanding of flow of gravity, of cleanliness, and consequence that started right here, in the land between the rivers. With hands with jugs with ash and care, you wake to the soft sound of snuffling and snorting. Not human this time. You turn your head slowly from the shaded rooftop where you've slept and see them pigs poking their snouts into a muddy trench near the alleyway. Just beyond them, a pair of goats nibble idly at the edge of a reed basket. A cow lumbers lazily across the yard, pausing to stare at you as if waiting for you to explain your presence. You don't move. You're too busy watching the forgotten cast of Sanitation the Animals. In ancient Mesopotamia, waste wasn't just a human problem. It was an animal problem too, and not just the kind that politely goes in a trench. No, you quickly discover that the streets, alleys, and yards of cities like Ur and Lagash were home to a constant, unregulated stream of animal droppings from working donkeys, herded sheep, wandering dogs, and the occasional rogue goose. You stroll down the alley. There's a thin crust of dried dung along the gutter. It crunches faintly under your sandals. A boy, with a broom, sweeps it half-heartedly into a pile, his attention more focused on a beetle crawling along the wall. His mother appears moments later, sighs loudly, and takes over, and they sweep the animal waste into a corner pit behind their home. Not a formal latrine, just a refuse heap, mostly dry, layered with ash and reeds. These heaps were multi-purpose, used for compost fuel or simply storage until disposal. A goat bleats loudly as if to protest this portrayal. You watch as a man leads two donkeys down the main road, each one leaving behind small gifts. The man doesn't stop. This is normal. This is accepted. In fact, some neighborhoods had children or servants whose specific job was to scoop and toss, creating a daily rhythm of tidying up after not only people, but their four-legged companions. You reach a larger estate near the canal. The animal yard out back is tidy, well kept. Straw covers the ground. A narrow waste channel runs along the side, guiding runoff away from the stable and into a communal trench. There's a small bucket of lime, perhaps used to sprinkle over manure for smell control. Functional, proactive, not unlike how the humans handled their own needs. Historians still argue whether animal waste was treated as carefully as human waste in Mesopotamian cities. Some say yes, particularly in wealthier areas where foul odors were thought to displease the gods. Others argue it depended on the animal's utility. Horses, after all, were rare and valuable. Dogs, less revered. Pigs, somewhere in between. One surviving document from a household inventory lists 2 small dogs for the courtyard and a sweep for the dog corner. That sweep, it seems, was both broom and job title. You turn a corner and spot a dog latrine, yes, really. A pit low to the ground, with what appears to be a broken clay jug beside it. Possibly an attempt to train the animals. More likely, a place where humans encouraged them to go, and then shoveled up the rest later. A fringe theory proposed by a few enthusiastic archaeologists with strong stomachs suggests that pigs were intentionally allowed to scavenge near human latrines, consuming waste and thereby cleansing the area. This was sanitation on four legs. Naturally, this practice was controversial, even at the time. One clay text includes a law prohibiting pigs from entering temple courtyards, citing unclean behavior. You stand beside a pen of goats and overhear a conversation between two older men arguing about where to put the chicken waste. One swears by the ash pit method. The other insists on digging a trench along the outer wall. They go back and forth like seasoned debaters. You nod appreciatively. Their debate could be happening in any modern farming forum. You walk past an alley where birds are nesting in the eaves of a home. Below them, a streaked wall and a stained window ledge. Even the sky wasn't safe from waste. So how did they manage? The answer, as usual, lies in layering and maintenance. Animal waste was dealt with much like human waste, through ash, sand, and sweeping. More often than not, it was shoveled into the same pits used for compost, or scattered across field edges, where it was left to dry and eventually degrade. And in some cases, it may have even been repurposed as fuel, especially in colder months. Or, for firing clay, you sit beside one such fuel pile, now bits of dried dung shaped into patties arranged in neat rows. The smell isn't pleasant, but it's earthy, practical, the very scent of survival. In one village, you see a shared waste compound, a circular enclosure where waste from animals and humans alike is collected. A group of women stir the pile with long sticks, adding layers of straw, then ash. They joke and gossip, keeping time with the work. A baby squeals nearby. Life continues rhythmically, respectfully, and here in the shared labor, the shared smells, and the shared responsibility, you see the truth sanitation was communal. Not a single person's burden. Not a class-based task, despite what the nobles thought. Everyone at some point had to lift a broom, carry a bucket, or step around a suspicious pile in the road. As night begins to fall, you see the same boy from earlier toss a final scoop of goat droppings into the trench. He hums to himself. His mother nods from the doorway. A dog barks. A cow sighs. The city exhales, and you realize managing waste wasn't just about toilets. It was about ecosystems, human and animal earth, and water ash and straw. Nothing was wasted unless you let it be. Nothing was beneath care, not even the daily gifts left behind by a donkey in the road. The sky is a deep indigo, now stars flickering faintly above the rooftops of the city. Torches flicker along the main road, casting long golden shadows across the clay brick walls. The city of Ur has quieted but not completely. There's a different kind of life now. One of watchmen travelers and soldiers, and yes, the occasional late-night emergency involving sanitation. You walk toward the outskirts of a military encampment nestled beyond the city wall. The men here are not elite priests or noble scholars. They are infantrymen, archers, guards, the backbone of Mesopotamian warfare. And like everyone else, they must answer the same inevitable call. You approach the first tent, pitched in a cluster of many arranged around a central fire. A few men sharpen spears. One dices onions. Another is clutching his stomach and walking briskly toward a small fenced area beyond the tents. You follow him discreetly to the soldier's latrine, a simple trench dug into the earth screened with a few woven mats and lined with sand. There are no seats, no polished clay tiles, no decorative jars of scented resin here. Just a hole, a shovel, and gravity. And yet it works. He squats, He finishes. He scoops sand over the spot and walks away, grumbling about the barley stew from the night before. It's primitive, yes, but there's a system in place, a rhythm, a shared understanding. Each camp had designated waste zones, often dug downwind and downslope from sleeping areas. Trenches were dug anew each day if needed and filled in when abandoned. In some larger outposts, wooden plank seats were placed across shallow pits, offering a modicum of comfort. One clay tablet from a border garrison describes how the sergeant punishes the lazy digger, presumably the man assigned to keep the trench usable. You wander into a supply tent and spot a bundle of rushes tied neatly with twine. Not for kindling, these are hygiene tools. A small pot of ash sits beside them, and a cracked clay bowl likely for rinsing. Even out here, cleaning tools traveled with the men, and nearby, perhaps most fascinating of all, a tiny tablet fragment, a soldier's inventory. Javelins, helmet, sandals, and yes, one bowl for the squat ditch. Practical, honest. Someone etched that with pride. You move toward the training yard. A line of young recruits jogs in circles, sweating beneath the early moon. One breaks off and walks toward a corner where a latrine trench has been freshly dug. He doesn't hesitate, just goes. You can't help but notice the lack of privacy, but no one seems to mind. In military life, modesty takes a back seat to necessity. Historians still debate whether soldiers were trained in sanitation protocol or simply picked it up by imitation. In one recovered garrison, tablet orders are clear. Waste shall not remain uncovered by dawn. Buckets shall be emptied. No pits near food. A list of rules written not for morality, but for survival. Disease could spread easily in camps. Dysentery parasites or worse. Some commanders issued rations of herbs believed to settle the stomach and purify the bowels. One record even mentions a gut doctor assigned to a detachment, though it's unclear if he had any formal training or just a legendary tolerance for bad smells. You pass by another part of the camp where latrine duty is underway. A pair of tired men are scooping out yesterday's trench, spreading ash and reinforcing the sides with stones. They joke quietly, but their movements are efficient. It's not a glamorous job, but it's respected. Everyone knows what happens when it's done poorly. At the edge of camp, you spot a larger trench, partially covered by a simple lean-to. It's for the officers. Here, at least there's a seat, wooden, a bit wobbly, but definitely more refined. Nearby, a jar of frankincense smokes lazily, warding off insects. A small clay tablet hangs from a nail reading, "Use with care." Others follow. It's not law. It's not even an order. It's just a reminder passed down from soldier to soldier that hygiene is collective. You go, you clean, you cover. Because no one wants to walk into someone else's mistake. You sit for a moment beneath a date palm, watching the firelight flicker across the tents. A man walks past carrying a bucket. Not water, not food. Just waste off to be buried at the edge of the camp. And you reflect the latrines of war were as essential as the weapons. More so, perhaps. For a sick army does not march. A foul camp does not sleep. And no general, however brilliant, can outwit dysentery. The Mesopotamians understood this not just in temples or cities, but on the march in the mud under the stars. Waste was part of war, and those who controlled it survived. Because sanitation, even in a battlefield camp, wasn't a luxury, it was a strategy. The campfires flicker and fade behind you as you make your way back toward the quieter quarters of the city. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays, a clay pot shatters, and a neighbor shushes a barking dog. The evening has truly settled now. Lamps glow dimly behind reed screens. A cool wind rustles through hanging linens. You pass an open window and catch the soft hum of a lullaby. But then you hear it raised voices, not angry exactly, but firm, heated in the way only neighbors can be when debating something deeply personal and utterly mundane. You follow the sound around the bend to a modest courtyard where two women stand on opposite sides of a low wall. One is holding a chamber pot. The other, arms folded, looks unimpressed. A third woman leans against the doorway of a nearby home, clearly enjoying the drama. The dispute. Someone used someone else's toilet. Ah, yes. The complex world of bathroom etiquette in ancient Mesopotamia. You settle discreetly beside a drying rack of linens and listen. The issue, it seems, is that the younger woman, visiting from another household, used the courtyard latrine without asking. The older woman owner of said latrine is insisting that guests should request permission, especially before dawn. The accused protests that she didn't want to wake anyone, which is met with a snort of derision. The third woman chuckles and offers a diplomatic comment about shared walls and shared smells. You nod. This is familiar ground, not just physically, but socially. Shared sanitation spaces required social contracts, some spoken, some implied. A chamber pot wasn't just a vessel, it was a boundary. A toilet pit wasn't just a hole, it was territory. In many households, toilets were located in communal courtyards or between homes. They might serve multiple families. And though no official laws survived to dictate rules of use, personal codes of conduct clearly existed. You pass a home where a tablet hangs near the latrine entrance. The inscription is faint, but it reads something like, "Let no stranger use what has not been offered." It's part hospitality, part warning. Historians still debate whether breaches of toilet etiquette were punishable or merely socially frowned upon. But anecdotal evidence, clay letters, and court records suggests that disputes about waste disposal noise and improper usage were common in city courts. You overhear a man in the next street grumbling about his neighbor's habit of emptying chamber pots into the shared gutter during mealtimes. Deliberate, he insists. He waits until the stew is on the fire. Etiquette extended to more than just access. There were rules spoken or not about timing, cleanliness, and even odors. In wealthier homes, servants lit incense or sprinkled herbs into the latrines. In poorer quarters, people burned small tufts of animal dung and dried reeds to control the scent. You stroll toward a bathhouse where several people are rinsing feet and faces. Near the corner, a toilet attendant is sweeping ash around the base of a latrine. He works quickly but methodically, stopping to nod at each new guest. One woman steps out and leaves behind a small token, a pinch of dried herbs. It's unclear whether this is payment or tradition, but the gesture is noted with a smile. In some communities, such tokens acted as a sign of thanks, or perhaps a way to excuse any unfortunate smells left behind. You walk alongside a man carrying a bundle of reeds and a small jug of water. He pauses at a latrine, enters, exits, and gently closes the screen behind him. Then he bows slightly to the owner of the house, who is seated nearby, weaving, and walks away without a word. Respect. Sometimes the etiquette wasn't about access, but distance. Don't watch. Don't talk. Don't interrupt someone's moment of relief. Clay tablets from temple archives suggest that even priests required privacy. One line reads, "Let the place of cleansing be entered alone." You think of all the ways people have tried to add grace to this awkward corner of life. Decorative jars, quiet rituals, placing fresh rushes in the pot, whispering apologies to unseen gods. And like everything else in Mesopotamian society, toilet etiquette followed hierarchy. A servant didn't use the master's seat. A visitor waited to be shown the correct pit. Children were taught to clean up and cover from an early age. One amusing school tablet includes a line chastising a student for foul behavior after study. Perhaps too much beer. Perhaps an unflushed pot. You pass a collapsed wall where once a courtyard latrine stood. Near it, etched into the floor tile, is a simple 3-line poem. Leave it clean so gods will smile and neighbors will not frown. A reminder that etiquette wasn't about politeness alone, it was communal survival. Cleanliness was civic duty. Quietness was kindness. And misuse, that was a declaration of war. You return to the street corner. The earlier argument has mellowed. The chamber pot has been emptied, rinsed, and placed in the sun. The two women are now talking about grain prices. One laughs. The tension is gone. Because ultimately, Mesopotamian toilet etiquette boiled down to a single timeless principle. Don't be gross. Morning returns once again, softer this time, with streaks of peach and pale blue stretching across the Mesopotamian sky. The streets begin to stir. A boy rolls a clay jar toward the well. An old woman hums while sweeping her steps, and in the distance a familiar scent curls through the air. Burnt frankincense and baked earth. You follow it, weaving past sleeping dogs and shuttered stalls until you arrive at a courtyard bathed in golden light. A young servant stands near a latrine, sprinkling powdered herbs over the seat, the floor, even into the air around it. The smell is sharp, resinous, and bright. You inhale and instantly feel cleaner somehow. This is the Mesopotamian answer to a question that echoes across time. How do you make a toilet smell better? The answer, of course, is scented solutions. You crouch beside a basket filled with crushed myrtle leaves, sprigs of coriander, and what looks like dried rose petals. In another jar, there's powdered sulfur, and beside it, a clay container that once held cedar oil, thick and sticky like ancient perfume. These were the air fresheners of antiquity, applied with a delicate hand or tossed generously into chamber pots, drainage pits, and public latrines alike. Mesopotamians didn't have aerosol cans or automatic diffusers, but they understood that smell could be both a problem and a tool. Clean-smelling latrines weren't just more pleasant, they were believed to ward off disease, and perhaps more importantly, to please the gods. You step inside a wealthy home, where a toilet room tucked off the main corridor includes a small incense altar. Nothing elaborate, just a hollowed stone dish, where resin would smolder, slowly masking odors and driving away insects. The latrine is swept clean, the seat gently warmed by the morning sun, and a faint floral scent hangs in the air. It feels intentional. Historians have found tablets listing scent mixtures used for ritual and domestic use. One recipe includes pine resin, crushed juniper white myrrh, ash, and the sweet oil of the southern reed. Whether for sacred rites or household freshness, these substances were used to transform a place. And perhaps in the latrine, transformation was most important. Turning waste into something manageable. Turning discomfort into dignity. In the temple quarters, you find another set of solutions. Priests maintain special blends of resins and perfumes used not just in rituals, but also in spaces of physical cleansing. One chamber, adjacent to a ceremonial washing room, contains a jar of camphor and a mixture of mint leaves soaked in oil. These were dabbed on the wrists, burned near the latrines, or even suspended in the air with damp cloths. Some researchers argue these were early fumigation methods, a way of fighting infection through scent. You hear a whisper from a nearby teacher lecturing young scribes: clean air, clean hands, clean speech. And indeed, all three were linked. Purity wasn't just about what you did, it was how you smelled doing it. You wandered to a public toilet structure near the city market. It's nothing fancy: a few benches, some stone dividers, and a channel draining into a wide trench. But off to the side, a woman is selling herb bundles, small cloth wraps filled with dried bay fennel and something like lemon balm. They're tied with twine and clearly intended for latrine users. You purchase one, or pretend to, and she smiles. Hold near your nose, she advises, or toss it in if someone before you was lazy. Practical and poetic. Waste may have been democratic, but so were the tricks to surviving it. Fringe theories have proposed that certain scented pastes, like those found in noble homes, were used not only for post-cleaning rituals, but as personal barriers against smell. A dab beneath the nose, perhaps. You consider this while passing a courtyard where a woman is rubbing oil behind her ears before entering the shared latrine. And of course, there's the most powerful of all scented solutions: fire. Ashes from burnt reeds, dung, or incense weren't just waste, they were weapons. Ash absorbed liquid, neutralized odor, and created a cleaner, drier environment. Many toilets were surrounded by baskets of powdered ash and herb ash mixtures. In one household, you see a mixture that includes ground sage and bark clearly chosen for its scent. You kneel near a half-collapsed latrine, and even now, centuries later, the soil beneath still smells faintly of resin and earth. The past lingers not just in stones, but in the air. Nearby, a man explains to his son how to clean the toilet properly. Use the broom. Use the ash. Then the mint water. Leave no ghosts behind. You're struck by the phrasing. No ghosts, meaning no smell. Or maybe something more. A belief that scent anchored the presence of waste, and that to remove one was to release the other. You walk away as the sun climbs higher, the smells of bread and herbs mingling now with wood smoke and distant livestock. But underneath it all, there's a subtle order to the air. The city doesn't stink. Not as it could. Because for all their limitations, the Mesopotamians fought back with crushed herbs, smoldering oils, and reed broom discipline. And somewhere, in a forgotten corner of this city, a toilet smells faintly pleasant. And that might be one of civilization's greatest victories. The late morning sun casts strong shadows now, and the city hums once more with its usual rhythm. Merchants calling out prices, donkeys trotting by with ceramic jugs, children chasing each other through tight alleys. You walk toward the medical quarter, a small enclave tucked behind the main temple, where healers live and treat the sick. You're here not for healing herbs or surgical tools, but to investigate something far more subtle: how bathroom habits shaped ancient medicine. You enter the courtyard of a healer's house. The space is clean, calm, shaded by a reed canopy. A woman crouches beside a shallow ceramic basin, pouring water over a child's feet. The child laughs, kicks, and is promptly scolded in a tone that implies this is an important ritual. Behind them, you spot what you're looking for: a small, orderly toilet room adjacent to the living space, and clearly used not just for elimination, but for observation. Yes, observation. You step closer. The walls are lined with shelves, tablets, dried herbs, clay jars, and strange samples. One bowl holds a pale chalky powder, another has something much less appetizing, and on a nearby shelf, a half-baked tablet etched with a list of symptoms and a drawing of a very grumpy-looking man. This, it turns out, is a primitive diagnostic lab. In Mesopotamian medicine, waste wasn't just waste, it was a clue. Healers regularly examined urine and feces to evaluate a person's health. Color consistency, frequency. These were all part of the diagnostic puzzle. And their notes survive today in tablets with titles like When the Stomach Cries Out or Readings from the Lower Gate. One particularly famous medical text outlines treatments for blockage of the inner channels, including both herbal teas and more physical interventions. It advises the use of fig paste warmed beer and the root of the reed that grows by silent water. You glance at a pot nearby. Yep, there's that reed again. You sit quietly while the healer, a middle-aged man with ink-stained fingers, begins preparing a treatment. He mashes herbs with oil and mixes them into a thick paste. His patient, a hunched older man, groans softly as he's handed a clay cup of the concoction. He drinks it slowly, with the resigned expression of someone who knows exactly what happens next, and in a few moments, he hurries to the corner latrine. You look away respectfully, but you notice the healer crouching nearby, watching not with disgust, but with concentration. He'll later record what happens and possibly adjust the dosage. This is not guesswork. It's a system. Historians still argue how systematic Mesopotamian medicine really was. Some see it as trial and error. Others point to recurring patterns, standardized treatments, and a surprising attention to data. But one thing is certain: toilets were part of it. Diagnosis didn't happen in the temples alone. It happened in clay pots and open trenches. You move to another room where a young apprentice is writing on a tablet. His tongue sticks out in concentration as he copies lines from a medical manual. If the excrement is pale, the man has been cursed by bad water. If it is black and does not float, he has eaten the wrong goat. Colorful, and perhaps more accurate than you'd expect. Another entry speaks of urine that smells of sharp stone, possibly indicating infection. Remedies include cool compresses, beer diluted with honey, and resting beneath the sky at dusk. You marvel at how bodily functions were not taboo, but tools respected, watched, even written about with poetry. One healer wrote, "To know a man's water is to know his spirit." In another household, you see a woman tending to a child with stomach pains. She's boiling herbs and adding crushed date seeds to the mix. Beside her sits a worn reed basket filled with Russia's water jars and a small clay scoop, standard equipment for cleaning and comfort. She offers the boy a few drops of oil and hums as he squirms. You crouch beside a window and glance into the street. Two men talk in hushed tones about a relative who's not gone for days. One suggests a prayer to Gula. The other recommends warm honey and vigorous walking. Both agree it's not a matter to ignore. You follow the conversation to a stall near the market where a man sells digestive remedies from clay jars: ground herbs, ash powder, spiced water, fermented fig wine, each one with claims to improve the flow of inner channels. Customers approach discreetly, make their purchases, and shuffle off without eye contact. It's subtle, almost sacred. A fringe theory among modern scholars suggests that latrines doubled as therapy spaces, a place for quiet reflection, privacy, and even spiritual cleansing. In some ruins, carved stone seats have been found with prayers etched beneath them, words only the sitter would see. A whispered connection between the healer, the body, and the divine. You sit beneath a tree in the healer's courtyard, watching a servant refill the water jar beside the latrine. She sprinkles crushed mint leaves into the basin and wipes the rim clean with practiced ease. She isn't rushed. She isn't reluctant. This is care, not just of place, but of people. And in that moment, you realize the toilet wasn't the opposite of medicine. It was part of it. Just as the stars were read to predict futures, the contents of a chamber pot were read to protect lives. Not glamorous, not glorious, but quietly, consistently essential. The city feels quieter now. Not silent, never silent, but slower. As you wander through the oldest quarters of Ur, you notice the worn edges of buildings, the slumped doorways, the broken gutters long since forgotten. The clay beneath your feet is cracked. The drains are dry. A few rats scurry from shadow to shadow. You're walking through what used to be a thriving neighborhood, but is now on the edge of collapse. And at the heart of that collapse, sanitation. You pause at a house with half its wall crumbled. Once, this was a fine dwelling, high ceilings, patterned brickwork, even a small private latrine. You can still see the outline of the waste channel, though it's now clogged with debris. Shards of pottery, a dog skull, a child's discarded shoe. This was once connected to the drain system, to the neighborhood trench, to the broader flow of water and life that kept Mesopotamian cities clean. But that connection is broken now. And when the flow stops, everything slows. Everything rots. You step around a pile of collapsed roof tiles and peer into what remains of the latrine chamber. It's full, not in use, not maintained, just left. The chute beneath is blocked. The air is thick. You don't breathe deeply here. This house isn't unique. Throughout the city's abandoned quarters, similar signs appear: blocked drains, broken trenches, latrine pits that overflowed and were never cleared. Some were sealed hastily with stone or clay. Others were simply walked away from. Historians studying these quarters often note that such infrastructure failures tend to precede broader urban decline. When the toilets stop working, the city begins to decay, not just physically, but socially. Neighbors stop cooperating. Smells invade sacred spaces. Disease spreads more easily. People move away. One clay tablet recovered from this area records a landlord's complaint. The waste pit has not been emptied in 6 moons. The tenants cannot breathe. There's no resolution noted. Perhaps he left too. In a nearby courtyard, you find what was once a shared sanitation facility, a public latrine connected to several homes. It's caved in now. Reed mats still cling limply to the supports brittle with age. Flies buzz lazily in the hot air, and nearby, a trench carved into the street has been choked with ash rags and animal waste, a desperate attempt perhaps to block off the stench. A group of children pass by giggling. One of them kicks a stone into the trench, covering his nose dramatically. The others laugh and run off. Even now, long after the collapse, the memory of failure lingers. You move through an alley where the houses are closer together, walls leaning inward. The drainage here has clearly failed long ago. A thick crust of hardened silt and refuse lines the gutters. You can see where water once flowed, now it pools in foul puddles, evaporating slowly under the sun. One fringe theory suggests that recurring blockages in neighborhood drain systems may have caused not just health issues, but political ones. If the city's lower districts suffered chronic overflows, while the priests and elites enjoyed clean private latrines, resentment would naturally build. A recovered letter from a city administrator pleads for help. The gutter in the south quarter floods the street again. The people grow angry. They shout at the temple doors. Sanitation became a social dividing line, the clean and the unclean, not in morality, but in infrastructure. You reach a once grand home now nearly buried. Inside the latrine seat is still intact, a smooth slab of clay with a sloped channel beneath it. But the channel leads nowhere. The pipe is cracked. The exit point blocked. Someone has jammed a bundle of rags and crushed pots into it in a last-ditch effort to keep the smell from coming back in. It didn't work. You sit for a moment beside this seat. It's eerie being here. A place meant for daily routine, now silent, abandoned. The clay is warm beneath your hand. The air smells faintly of dust, old water, and time. And it hits you when sanitation fails. It doesn't fail loudly. There is no crash, no sudden collapse. It happens slowly. The waste piles up. The drains clog. The servants stop showing up. The smells creep in. And people stop caring. Eventually, the gods stop listening. You walk past a ruined shrine where a stone basin once held water for cleansing. It's dry now, cracked. A small animal has made a home beneath it. The altar above it is scorched, the cuneiform faint. But you can still read the first line. To keep the body pure, one must keep the path clean. A simple sentence, a warning maybe. You leave the ruined quarter behind and return toward the living parts of the city. The streets are better swept here. The channels still run, albeit slowly. The latrines still open and close with soft clay lids. The smell is not pleasant, but it is managed, and you realize the difference between a thriving city and a dying one may be no more than the width of a single blocked pipe. You return slowly to the heart of the city. The ziggurat stands tall, as it always has, its silhouette outlined in fading gold. The streets wind with a kind of practiced order familiar now. You pass the places you know, the bathhouse with the cracked basin, the corner where children play. Beside the reed mats, the stall selling bundles of dried herbs for various purposes. It's the end of the day, and your steps lead you to one final stop. A modest home. Not noble, not poor. Somewhere in between. A middle-class household, the beating heart of the city. And here in this house, you see the legacy of everything you've witnessed. The toilet is small, tucked behind a curtain made of woven reeds. It's nothing special. A clay seat, a scoop of ash, a worn jug of water. But it's clean, cared for. You watch a boy enter, sit quietly, and emerge with a shy expression. He rinses his hands in a basin nearby, wipes them on a cloth, and runs off without a word. His mother appears a moment later, smoothing the mat, replacing the lid over the seat, and sprinkling a faint line of powdered herbs. She lights a tiny oil lamp, places it beside the doorway, and hums a tune as she returns to her cooking fire. There's no ceremony here, no fanfare, but it's civilization distilled. You sit for a while watching the light fade. In this home, there is continuity, a rhythm. The toilet works not because of innovation or luxury, but because someone tends to it. Every day, quietly, faithfully. It's that same principle that carried across 5,000 years. Sanitation is not glamorous, It's not dramatic, but it is essential. The invisible infrastructure that allowed the rest of life to flourish. You remember the temples, the soldiers, the street arguments, the herbal bundles, the incantations, the jokes scratched into bathroom walls. It all adds up to one very human story. You once thought toilets were simple. Now you understand they were a mirror of belief, of community, of decay, of dignity. Because in the land between the rivers, people didn't just build canals and temples. They built bathrooms, and that tells you more than any monument ever could. You pass through one last alley where water trickles faintly over the stones. It smells like clay and mint. A cat stretches in the shadow of a courtyard wall. A reed screen flutters softly in the breeze, and beneath all of it, the seats, the drains, the rules, the silence is a simple truth. They tried to stay clean, to keep order, to care for their cities, their families, themselves. And in doing so, they gave us not just civilization, but the blueprints for how to live together. And now, as we leave the winding alleys of ancient Ur behind, let the quiet of the past settle gently over you. Imagine the warmth of the clay beneath your feet, the distant sound of sandals on stone, the hum of a water jar being filled. Nothing is urgent anymore, nothing noisy, just slow breath, slow sky, slow time. You lie back beneath the stars the way they would have on rooftops, cooled by night air wrapped in linen, listening to the sounds of a city that never fully slept. The river still flows in the distance. The canals still carry dreams downstream. The toilets, those humble corners of the world, stand silent, waiting, witnesses to everyday life, faithful in their purpose. And now you drift, knowing that even in the earliest cities someone lit a lamp, swept the floor, placed a jar just so that someone else might be clean, might be safe, might rest easier that night. You are not so different from them. You breathe out, and the wind carries it softly away. You are cradled by history, by habit, by the quiet kindness of routine. There is nothing left to do now. No more alleys to explore, no more walls to read, no more clay to brush with curious fingers. Only sleep, soft and still, like ash settling after fire, slow and deep like water through an old pipe, and peaceful like a house where everything is at last in order. End of script. Sweet dreams.